Another Blackhawks season is in the books. Welcome to From Center Ice. My name is Courtney. Hello, how have you been? I know it's been a while, but now I am here. And I'm here to wrap up the 2022-23 Chicago Blackhawks season. It has been quite a wild one, to say the least. We all knew going into it that it was not going to be a good season record-wise, and the team was definitely quote-unquote tanking. But they did get a brand new head coach in the offseason with Luke Richardson, so it was going to be interesting to see what he would come in and do, what the team would look like, even though they lacked some skill. Would they be able to be competitive even if they were losing? Would it be just a complete disaster? Or would it be somewhere in the middle where it would seem like the team is just stuck in mediocrity forever? That last one is the one you really want to avoid. And thankfully they did. Like I said, it wasn't that great of a season record-wise, but we knew that. What we did get treated to, though, was a team that, while they may not have matched up and down the lineup with some of their opponents, they still came out every night and gave a very solid and valiant effort. They were battling for pucks. They were never truly out of a game, it felt like. There were some blowouts here and there, but that's going to happen to any NHL team throughout a season, no matter how good you are, or how bad you are in the case of the Blackhawks this season. But on most nights, this team was really fun to watch, and that's not something that I was totally expecting going into the season, especially since we had heard that most of the promising young players would spend the year in Rockford. Now, due to a lot of injuries and some player movements closer to the deadline, we did end up seeing some of the rookies, maybe more than we thought we were going to. But the good news there as well is that with those call-ups, the Rockford IceHogs still are fighting for a playoff spot. They currently sit fourth in the Central Division, and the top 5 teams in that division make the playoffs. They have 2 games remaining, but so do the Iowa Wild and the Chicago Wolves, who are right behind them. If the IceHogs win tonight, they do clinch a spot, so we can pay attention to that score and see how that goes. Most likely, if they do clinch that spot, they are going to end up playing the Iowa Wild in a play-in round, but there is a scenario where they could play the Chicago Wolves. But that's a matter for an American League video, and this is about the Blackhawks. The final game of the 82-game regular season was held on Thursday night at the United Center, so the Blackhawks were at home. They faced off against the Philadelphia Flyers, so 2 teams who are out of the postseason this year. So not a very exciting game, all things considered, because neither team really had anything to play for at that point. But earlier in the day, in swoops the Chicago Blackhawks management, and Kyle Davidson puts out a statement saying that the team will not be re-signing Captain Jonathan Toews in the offseason. So, after 16 years, Thursday night's game was the final game for Jonathan Toews as the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. All of a sudden, that game became a lot more interesting, didn't it? And perhaps it's kind of fitting that he ended his career in Chicago against the team that he won his first Stanley Cup against. I did not make that connection until I saw them on the ice, and I was like, this looks a little familiar here. And then my brain started working, and it clicked, and I thought that was kind of cool. I do wish the team had given us a little bit more notice. Had I not had less than a full day, I would have tried to get tickets to go to the final game. I was at Patrick Kane's last home game as a Chicago Blackhawk. I was also there for the game right before that to see his last hat trick as a Chicago Blackhawk. So it would have been nice to see Toews' last game as well, but such is life. I watched it from home, and it was fun instead of super sad. I mean, I did end up crying at some point, especially when they showed the highlight video at the end of the game. But watching Toews out there, he just looked happy, like he was soaking up the moment and really appreciating everything that has happened in his career in that building. And the fans gave him a nice and very loud send-off. I would say it's unfortunate the Blackhawks lost to that game, but they kind of needed to because it came down to the very last day of the regular season to see how the lottery odds would play out. The Columbus Blue Jackets had done the Blackhawks a favor, winning their second to last game of the season. But on Thursday night, in Chicago, with 2 minutes left in regulation, the Hawks pull the goalie, and Andreas Athanasiou just has to tie up the game. And that sends it to overtime. Now, all I wanted out of that game was to see Jonathan Toews score one last goal as the captain of the Blackhawks. But he did that in the second period on the power play to make it even better. So we did not need overtime for that to happen, but alas, this team decided to extend the game, get a point in the standings. The only way this would have been more acceptable is if Jonathan Toews scored the overtime winning goal. And he almost did. He had a breakaway in overtime, but Felix Sandstrom stopped the puck before it was able to slide in 5-hole. That would have been a classic Toews 5-hole game winner, but Sandstrom stopped it, and then Ivan Provorov went down to the other end and scored on Alex Stalock to end the game, to end the season, and the Blackhawks lost in overtime. So because they got that extra point in the standings, they relied on the Columbus Blue Jackets to go out Friday night and win a game to put them ahead of the Blackhawks in the standings and clinch second to last place in the league for the Hawks. But the bad team that Columbus is, they lost to the Buffalo Sabres in regulation. So the Hawks and Columbus tied in points, but the Blackhawks have the tiebreaker, so Chicago finished third last. Now, from a draft perspective, that is not terrible because the lowest they can possibly pick is 5th overall. But when you have Connor Bedard at number 1, and the Hawks were in the driver's seat for most of the season where they really could have cemented themselves as the last place team, it does make one a bit salty to get third last. But here is what I will have to say about that because I have come to terms with it. If you finish last in the league, 32nd overall, your team has the best odds to draft that first overall player, this year it being Connor Bedard. So you expect to draft first overall after all of the pain you went through during the regular season, watching the team lose left and right, have horrible games, you finish last, you're going to get Connor Bedard. And then we have the draft lottery that is coming up at the beginning of May. And it is not a guarantee that the 32nd place team will draft number 1 overall. It all depends on how those lottery balls fall. So, finishing third last, I am not going into the draft lottery expecting to draft first overall. Should that happen, that would be absolutely amazing, and it is quite possible it could happen. I can't say probable because there are actual numerical odds to this, but it is possible. But let's say you are the last team, and in this case it is the Anaheim Ducks. If you go into draft lottery night and your ball does not fall in that first overall spot, that is so much worse. Having that spot and then losing it compared to not having that spot, not expecting to get it, and then maybe actually getting it. Now that the standings are solidified, there's no way we can be disappointed because we're not expecting to get Bedard. But hey, crazier things have happened. And if the Hawks do end up picking 5th overall, I know some people think it is doom and gloom and everything is horrible, we're not going to get a high-end star and everything wasn't worth it. Just remember that we have a new front office staff now. It's not the old regime who probably would have blown that pick. We will see who they and their scouts have decided is the right player for the Blackhawks in that spot, and we just have to hope that they make the right choice. This draft year is loaded with talent. Obviously, Connor Bedard is above the rest, but the Hawks are guaranteed to draft a good player. We just have to wait and see how it all ends up. But to put a bow on this season, I have the top 10 point leaders for your 2022-23 Chicago Blackhawks. Now, this is not including players who have been traded away. It is guys who ended the season with the team. So at number 1, we have Andreas Athanasiou, the guy who destroyed our chances at locking up second worst in the league. Andreas, why did you have to get that last goal? But with that last goal, it put him at 20 goals on the season and 20 assists for 40 points. Number 2, we have Taylor Radish. He also scored 20 goals, but in only 78 games, and he added 17 assists for 37 points. Number 3, we have Seth Jones. Seth played 72 games this season. He scored 12 goals and added 25 assists, which is good for 37 points. Number 4, we have Tyler Johnson. He only played 56 games this season due to injury, but he scored 12 goals and added 22 assists for 32 points. So not the worst season from Tyler Johnson, not playing a whole lot of games. I mean, 56 is still a lot, but not when you think that there's 82 games in a regular season. Which also leads me to the next guy at number 5, the captain, Jonathan Toews. Toews played 53 games this season and scored 15 goals and added 16 assists, which is good for 31 points. Number 6, we have Jason Dickinson, added at the beginning of the year in a trade for Riley Stillman to the Vancouver Canucks. He scored 9 goals and added 21 assists for a total of 30 points. Number 7, we have Philip Kurashev. He scored 9 goals and added 16 assists for 25 points on the season. Number 8, Boris Kachuk, who really just turned it on the second half of the year, and it seemed like he couldn't stop putting up points. He ended up with 5 goals and 11 assists for 16 points. Number 9, we have the other brother, Caleb Jones. He scored 4 goals and added 12 assists for 16 points on the season. And last but not least, number 10, we have Jujhar Khaira. He put up 6 goals and 8 assists on the season, which is good for 14 points, and he scored the first goal for the Chicago Blackhawks in their final game of the season. Now let's look at the tank commanders. I mean, goaltenders. Alex Joyride Stalock. He played 27 games this year for the Chicago Blackhawks. Stalock had a record of 9-15-2 with 2 shutouts. He ended the year with a goals against average of 3.01 and a 908 save percentage. And he was just so much fun to have in net this year. Despite the numbers, despite the record, you can't say you did not enjoy watching this guy play hockey. Especially after everything he's been through, the myocarditis from COVID, not knowing if he would ever come back and play. Then he gets put into the net for the Blackhawks, and he was a fan favorite all year, and from all reports, he was a favorite in the locker room as well. And then we have Peter Mrazek. When not dealing with groin injuries, he played 39 games for the Blackhawks this season. He had a record of 10-22-3 and 0 shutouts on the year. He ended with a goals against average of 3.66 and an 894 save percentage. The numbers are definitely not very kind to Mrazek here, and it's kind of what everybody expected when we got him from Toronto in a trade, but more nights than not, he was battling in net for this team, and he did come up with some incredible saves in net and often kept the team in games. There were also some games that were rather bad, but more often than not, goaltending was not the issue this year for the Blackhawks. And like I mentioned earlier, we did see some of our young prospects come up and play games in the lineup for the Hawks, so I have some of those numbers for you as well with their points, as well as the goaltenders, because we had to call up a few due to injuries to the other two. Number 1, the one everybody wanted to see, of course, Lukas Reichel. He ended up playing 23 games with the Blackhawks this year. He scored 7 goals and added 8 assists for 15 points, which is not bad for the rookie and an upgrade from where we saw saw him in his first season. Last year, he saw 11 games with the Blackhawks and only put up 1 assist. So, development is happening. There's the good news. Another surprise prospect was Cole Gutman. He played 14 games for the Blackhawks before being shut down due to surgery, but he scored 4 goals and added 2 assists for 6 points in those games, and he looked like a really decent center prospect. I was at the game for his first goal, so that made me very happy as well. And I called it happening. You can just ask Johnny Rockford. He was sitting right next to me. Number 3, my boy, Isaac Phillips, the one and only number 41 for your Chicago Blackhawks and Rockford Ice Hogs. He saw 16 games with the Blackhawks this year, and he scored his first NHL goal. And he added 4 assists and had 5 points in those games. Number 4, another defenseman, Philip Roos. He played 17 games with the Blackhawks, scoring 1 goal and adding 2 assists for 3 points. Number 5, after joining the Blackhawks at the conclusion of his college season, we have Wyatt Kaiser, another defensive prospect. You can never have too many of those. Well, I guess you can if they aren't seeing ice time, but it's always good to have defensive prospects in the system because sometimes defensemen take longer to develop. But Wyatt Kaiser didn't look out of place and seemed to fit right in with the Hawks when he joined them. He played 9 games and didn't score a goal, but he did register 3 assists. I definitely look forward to seeing more of him next year, especially after having an off season, after seeing what the pace of the NHL is like. We'll see if he slots directly into the NHL lineup or if he sees time with Rockford. Either way, he is a very exciting prospect to keep an eye on. And then we have the goaltenders. First up is Arvid Soderblom, who ended up playing 15 games with the Blackhawks this year. He had a record of 2-10-2, a goals against average of 3.45, and an .894 save percentage. We did see an upgrade in his play from what we saw last year when they just completely threw him into the deep end. But he also came in at the very beginning of the season, and he was expecting to be in Rockford all year, and then suddenly after 2 games, he's called up, and then he's just forced to be the guy because both Stalock and Mrazek got injured. It was a very chaotic start to the season for Soderblom, and when he got sent back to Rockford, he was dealing with an injury. But as of late, he has been playing very well for Rockford, so that is a good sign. Next up, we have Jackson Stauber, who must have been channeling Mr. Goalie himself, because he only played 6 games with the Blackhawks this year, but he had a record of 5-1-0. He had a goals against average of 2.81 and a .911 save percentage. I don't know where that genius came from in net. He was out there flying left, right, making saves all over the place, and we have not really seen that before or since in Rockford. So who knows? I am very interested to see Stauber's game next year if they do keep him around. So that's it for individual players. Let's just look at some team stats to end the year. Even though they might be kind of depressing, we just have to do it. Just stick with me. The Chicago Blackhawks finished this season with a record of 26-49-7. It's not great, but it was good for 59 points, which tied for second last in the league, but again, we hold the tiebreaker over Columbus, putting us ahead of them. The Blackhawks scored 204 goals on the season, but they allowed 301, which is good for a -97 goal differential. At least it's under 100. Silver linings, folks. Silver linings. When it comes to average goals per game, the Blackhawks were scoring 2.46 goals per game, which was dead last in the league, and they were allowing 3.65 goals per game, which wasn't dead last in the league, but it was 28th. Also 28th was their power play, which converted at 16.4% over the season. For those keeping track at home, that is very bad. The penalty kill was killing penalties at a 76.2% rate. That was not 28th in the league, but it was 22nd in the league. Funny enough, there are two teams who made the playoffs who had a worse penalty kill than the Blackhawks, that being the Florida Panthers and the Los Angeles Kings, but that means nothing other than they just allowed a few more power play goals to their opponent. Nothing really to hang our hats on there, my friends. But the Blackhawks did win 52.7% of their face-offs taken, which was good for 6th in the league, which did drop a bit when Toews was out due to illness. And I am very interested to see where they will end up next year because, as I said before, Jonathan Toews is not coming back. So all of those numbers, all of that information wraps up your 2022-2023 Chicago Blackhawks. It has been a very up and down year with more downs than ups, unfortunately. But let me ask you this. How do you feel about the team going forward? There is really no way for us to know right now what the roster is going to look like next year. I couldn't even begin to make predictions right now. But based on moves that Kyle has made and the coaching that you saw from Luke Richardson, how are you feeling about this team moving forward? Let me know down in the comments. All of that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am happy to be back. I will have playoff content up here, especially if the Ice Hogs do end up clinching that spot. Otherwise, we are going to switch to blue mode behind me and go full throttle with the Maple Leafs. I'm sure you are all very excited about that. But again, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel, give this video a like. That would make me so very happy. If you want to follow on social media or any of that, all of that information is down in the description for you. Or just go over to FromCenterIce.com. Everything is over there as well. But that's going to be it from me in this one. I'm going to pop this video in the edit machine, and then I'm going to turn on the Ice Hogs game tonight to see if the team can clinch a playoff spot. We will see how it goes. Get some rest, drink some water. The season is finally over for the Blackhawks, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye, guys.